Ready to start? We're going to start as soon as Julio let us know that, okay, now we are live in YouTube, so that everybody be aware that we will be broadcasting this session live on YouTube. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. We really appreciate to see all our academics related to quality management systems here in the UNAM. It is really important, your presence in this cycle of conferences that we have prepared with the international experts that very kindly they have accepted to teach us free of charge, of course. So we really appreciate that generosity from them. And if you don't mind, I will immediately start to reading something about our first speaker today. But before, I would like to let you know, probably you just noticed, everything will be conducted in English this session. I know that sometimes we don't practice English as much, speaking English as much as we're reading or writing in here in the university. Our English level used to be really good, but we don't practice it often. So after each presentation, it will be the opportunity, of course, to ask some questions to our speakers, and if you are not brave enough to give it to ask them in English, we are happy to translate it for you, okay? So, well, saying this, welcome to everybody again, and especially also to the people who are following this broadcast from the university into the world by YouTube. So, we are very honored to have Sally Swinchgood as our first speaker of this session. She will be talking us about the high-level structure, now called our harmonized structure. She was involved very closely in the development of this structure. And as you know, this work was very, very important because permit us and other organizations to be able to integrate management systems easier, those that has this particular structure. Of course, in the university, we have integration or we have management system that integrates CASCO standards with ISO 9001, and CASCO standards have their particular harmonized structure, as everybody knows, and will be a topic of conversation later during the year because we are reviewing in CASCO that structure as well, and we will have a finished document. We will present it for all of you in the university as well. So, well, with that very important point about Sally's background, I will also say that she's a technical program manager at ISO and previously worked for BSI in the UK national standard body. I think that all of us know the importance of BSI in the standardization world. She enjoys discussing how we can do things better, as well as specific topics such as ISO Net Zero guidelines and health and safety management, especially psychological health and safety and infectious disease management, something that you really like as well. We have we have a lot of you researching actually in those topics as well. And the future, of course, of management systems. So, can we give up an applause for our first speaker, please?
Many thanks, Monica, for that very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. On language, if you do not understand what I'm saying, raise your hand. I will slow down, I will explain, or Monica can translate for you. I want this to be your session. I also want you to ask questions. I want us to have a discussion. Otherwise, it'll be very boring. It's late in the day. We don't want to be bored. Let's enjoy this backwards and forwards, okay? And there are people in this room, I have my colleagues in this room, who know at least as much as me and probably more. So I've asked my friend Isaac here not to criticise me until after I've finished if I get something wrong, because we're none of us perfect. Like our management systems, they're never perfect and we can always improve. So let's make a start. And I'm going to start by taking us back to the basics. What is a management system standard? Okay, so we go back a step further. What's a management system? We throw the words around all the time, but do we still think about what do they actually mean? What's the purpose of a management system? It's to embed things into the way you run your business, into your processes, into your systems, maybe the other way around, and working everything together to achieve the objectives that you want to achieve in that area of work, but also overall for your organisation. And it's really important to remember that even if they don't implement our very lovely ISO standards, and everybody should, obviously, particularly 9001, but you've still got a management system standard, a management system, even if you haven't implemented a standard, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to run your business. You've got systems in place. So the formal definition is a little bit difficult for new people sometimes to break down and understand. It's a set of interrelated or interacting elements of an organisation to establish policies and objectives, as well as processes to achieve those objectives. So that's the formal, expanded, got lots of detail in it, definition of a management system. But essentially, it's how you get things done. And I think if you always retain that, it's all the different things you do to achieve what you're trying to achieve. Those are your systems, that is your management system. And it's important to remember that in ISO language and in our standards, a management system can address more than one discipline. 9001 is a quality management system standard, but there are also management system standards out there that combine some key topics. So it's not always a single discipline, and it's worth remembering that. But mainly, the most widely used standards are each a single discipline. So quality, occupational health and safety, environmental management, cybersecurity. Those are our 4 biggest ones. But there's another 50 that you could be using and integrating with those top 4 most popular standards. So, basically saying what I've already said. In ISO, a management system standard is a framework, and it helps organisations to implement and maintain a system to manage an area of importance in all aspects of what they do. So it's helping you not to work in silos, which is so important because historically we've worked in silos. So you'll have your quality management team with specific objectives. They've got specific things to achieve. And then you've got your health and safety team, which also have specific objectives and things to achieve, but they're not talking to each other. And sometimes that objective to make $1 million this month is really at odds with looking after your workers' health and safety. So we need to bring them together. Integrating these things, making sure they are dealt with in a holistic way, is going to help your business, because you won't have dark corners that suddenly trip you over and cause an issue because you hadn't thought about the risks associated with all the different topics and whether the processes genuinely work together into a system that's coherent for everything you do. This microphone's driving me mad, so I'm going to get one of the others. Perfect. Okay, so using ISO management system standards can help you build these aligned systems so that you can really make sure that your organisation is thinking about all of the many really important overarching aspects. In this day and age, cybersecurity is critical. We need to think about it, but that's got to work in line with your quality management and your health and safety management and your environmental management, your risk management, whatever it is you're focusing on. But they've all got to be working together. We're going to come to the harmonised structure and how that helps in a minute, but let's just start with the different types of management system standards we have in the ISO catalogue. 9001 is what we would call a generic management system standard. It is what a management system standard is intended to be. It can apply to any organisation, anywhere in the world, doing anything. It doesn't matter if it's a one-person business or if it's a government. You can apply the same standard. Now, you'll apply it differently. You won't approach it in the same way because you'll have different contexts. And I'm sure you're all aware of the importance of context when we're talking about management systems. But the requirements still apply and can apply. It's very rare that an organisation genuinely can't apply the core requirements of a management system standard. But then we also have the sector-specific management system standards. So quality is often the driver for sector-specific standards. In some particularly safety-critical industries, the generic standard that applies to everybody, including the one-man band, might not be enough. If you're working in the nuclear industry, you may want to add some extra requirements. Medical devices is another one. Very specific regulatory framework, needs to approach it slightly differently and with a bit more control over it, less vagueness. So often in generic standards, including our core requirements, they can be deliberately a little bit vague, a little bit ambiguous, because it depends on your context how you apply them. But when you come into aerospace or the automotive industry, if something goes wrong, people die. So they add extra requirements to strengthen their quality management to protect us. And that's the purpose of ISO standards. It's to make the world safer, easier, better for all of us. So sometimes we need those extra requirements. Clicking the wrong button. Notes for later. Okay, so we've also then, it gets a little bit complicated in the rule book, the ISO directives on the different types of management system standards. For most people, for most users, an ISO management system standard is a requirements document, something you can get certification against, right? But we also have a type B, which is the guidance for those management system standards. They're still considered management system standards. Some of them provide implementation guidance of the whole requirements document. So in this case, we have ISO 9002, which provides the implementation guidance for 9001, clause by clause by clause, mirrors it completely. But you also have type B guidance documents that may focus on a specific aspect of something. So it might be performance evaluation, it might be configuration management, it might be project management. So that's the place where you as an organisation, as a user, you say, what am I not quite sure about? Where do I need more information? How do I go deeper into this beyond the basic requirements? And those documents will help you do that. So I've just talked about that. Let's get into the harmonised structure, which is what we're here to talk about. But first of all, let's talk about the two different terms. There is the harmonised approach and the harmonised structure. They're not the same thing. The phrases are a little bit similar, so people get them confused. The harmonised approach refers to how we develop management system standards, the processes we go through to do it, the rules that apply to them. So unlike most ISO standards, a technical committee cannot just decide it wants to write a new management system standard. In ISO, we're very, very aware that organisations can get overwhelmed. We really genuinely don't want thousands of them because you wouldn't know where to start. And most of them probably wouldn't get that much use because there's just too much, right? So there's a whole process involved which is called the harmonised approach, higher levels of approval, more scrutiny. Do we really need this? Does the market really need it? Are users going to want it? Which is why we only have 54 requirements documents for management systems out of a catalogue of 27,000 standards. So, you know, it's a tiny number, it's a tiny percentage, and they also are the most widely used, which is interesting. So the harmonised structure, which I'm here to tell you more about, really, is often referred to as the blue text for people who've been around a while. It's the core requirements, it's the core terms and definitions, and it's the core structure with clause headings. So every single one of those 54, more or less, has exactly the same base document, which means that when you're picking up management systems for use in your organisation, they're familiar. You're already doing those things. If you've used one, the core requirements in the second one, the base is the same. So it makes it simpler to then go, okay, so I've got quality in place. Now I really want to make my environmental management more systematic. I want to make sure it's fully embedded in the organisation. And you go and get ISO 14001. You'll already be doing some of those requirements. And then you can look at the specifics. Okay, but we're not doing this. So how do we embed this into what we're doing next to our quality requirements? So they work together, so they're not in conflict with each other. That's what the harmonised structure is really there for. It's to help us integrate, help the user. These are going to be sent to you, so these are just links. These are where you can find the information, read them for yourselves, and get familiar. So in the harmonised approach, the way we write management system standards, the first thing we have to do is write a justification study. Why do we need this document? Have you really thought about it? Is there another document out there already doing the same thing? Are you overlapping with somebody? So we take a lot of care and effort to make sure that we're not going to duplicate things or contradict other standards or conflict with them. And that justification study is part of it. And it asks questions like, who's going to benefit? Who are your stakeholders? Who are your interested parties in management system language? What benefits are they going to get out of it? Which sustainable development goals is this document going to support? Why? So this study is evolving all the time. As our world changes, we're asking bigger questions. We're asking for more thought to go into it. The blue text, the harmonised structure, is in Appendix 2. And there's a link in the ISO directives to that, so everybody can read it. And that includes guidance for the people writing the standards. It's a very interesting read for you as academics, I would say, because it often explains the intent of the core requirements. What does this actually mean? What should you do? What should you really not do? And some of the what you should really not do refers to translation issues. You know, we work in English, but our standards get translated into hundreds of languages. And that's a challenge, you know. We want our every requirement to be understood. We don't want there to be ambiguity. We don't want use Spanish speakers to translate a word and get a completely different requirement from the one the working group was intending for you to have. So we know there are some words that just don't translate very easily. So we're constantly working on, okay, how can we say this? How can we say this without losing the meaning, but so that it can be translated into Spanish or Japanese or Dutch. Some languages have far more words than other languages, and English has quite a lot of words. It's one of the higher ends of the vocabulary counts. So English speakers can go, but no, that's not precisely correct, and it might not be. But we have to remember that other languages don't have that word, so we can't use it. So better to write more words and explain what we mean than use that piece of vocabulary that nobody understands. Okay, so we have had management system standards in ISO for a long time now, but before 2012, they all looked different. And that was becoming a problem. So the harmonised structure, then known as the high-level structure, was introduced. Experts from the management system communities, many of them from quality management, got together to devise what the core requirements that should apply to all management systems look like. How can we set this out? What are the important things that every organisation has to do when they're managing their business? That was in place, untouched more or less, until 2021, when a fairly substantial revision of the high-level structure was introduced. And that revision was based on feedback. It was based on user feedback. It was based on committee feedback. All the experts fed into this process, and we learnt which ones of these requirements didn't quite work. We need to rewrite them. Oh, we didn't remember that very critical item. We need to get that in now. Change management, for example, got strengthened in 2021. So, like with all standards, the harmonised structure is not set in stone. You know, it's not chiselled into a rock that we can never change. It is something that will evolve over time because the world evolves, users evolve, we get new feedback, we learn more all the time. And then in 2024, there were some limited updates on top of that 2021 revision. Stronger governance was part of it, but the key one really was the introduction of a very gentle requirement, actually, to consider whether climate change is relevant for this management system standard. And this came on the back of the ISO London Declaration, which was signed in 2021 by all ISO members, 175 or so countries, recognising that standards need to recognise the climate crisis and build consideration of climate into their documents. Obviously, some documents there's more implications for some subjects than there is for others. But the thinking is, 9001, biggest standard in the world, used by millions of organisations. We just direct the user to think about it. Have you thought about climate change? How is that going to affect your quality management system? Is it going to affect your quality management system? And there was a lot of debate about it, but it's in there. And it also mentions, which is really important in a note, that your interested parties might have requirements about this. Go and talk to them. Don't assume whatever topic you're working on, it's not relevant to. You need to go out and explore that with your customers and with your other interested parties. I'm assuming you all know this, and I didn't go into all the sub-clauses, but it's a little reminder of what the top-level clauses are. Context. Context changes everything. You've got to start there. You've got to understand it, and you've got to keep looking at it because context changes every day. Anybody who reads the news knows that context is changing constantly. You've got to see if that's relevant for what you're doing and whether you need to take measures to deal with your changes in context. Leadership. No management system's going to work without leadership commitment. It's absolutely got to be there. We're back to siloed thinking. If it's just, you know, Monica, who's responsible for quality here, and the top management don't care, it's going to be an uphill struggle. You're never going to do it well. You might make some change, but you're never going to make a whole-scale change. So top management commitment, absolutely critical for management systems, regardless of the topic you're talking about. And then we get into, which again you're all going to know, the Deming cycle. Plan, do, check, act. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. This never stops. All parts in motion all the time. You need to plan. You need to look at your risks. What are the risks? What could go wrong? What could go right? Where are your opportunities? How can you do things better? And how can you work with all that to set your objectives and to start putting them in place? Support. We need resources. We need to know what competencies we need to deliver these objectives that we've set out. And then operations. How do we go about all of this? The actual practical application day to day. And then critical step. And we kind of forget about it sometimes. I think some businesses, when they're starting out, forget about this, is performance evaluation. You can put all these pretty plans in place. You can set these great objectives and they look fantastic. And all these processes have been set up and they're underway. But are they working? Are they actually doing what you want them to do? Are you getting the results you expected to? Or is it just not really making much difference? So we have to monitor, we have to evaluate, we have to analyse what's coming out of what we've put in place. And then we have to improve it. Because it can always be improved. Maybe it is working, but maybe it's only working like 50% as well as you thought it was going to work. Let's get it up to 80%, let's push towards 100% and then stretch ourselves a bit further with some more challenging objectives. So the performance evaluation, the improvement clauses are absolutely critical to management system standards, even though when we're developing them, they're often less hotly debated than everything else, but they are absolutely critical. Okay, so this gives you a little bit of detail about those changes that were introduced in 2021 to update the original harmonised structure. So a new requirement that the organisation shall determine which of the requirements of interested parties are to be addressed. So I'm sure you all know that there are many different types of interested parties. People who are interested in what you're doing. They might be affecting you and what you're doing, or you may be affecting them. Some of them are relevant, some of them are less relevant. And you have to make that determination. Who is relevant to my management system standard? My management system, and which of their needs and expectations are relevant? Because they may have all sorts of really strange needs and expectations which are nothing to do with your management system standard or your management system, and you don't have to address them. You need to sit down and really work it out. What's relevant here? Do I actually care that this customer needs a box of chocolates every Friday? No, I don't. That's not going to affect my business. It's not going to affect our relationship. We'll ignore that requirement and we'll focus on the ones that matter. Planning of changes, I already mentioned that. And it's kind of strange that we didn't have it in the first place, and committees kept adding it in. So we've now made it a permanent feature because change happens. And if you can foresee change, you can plan change. If you plan change, you manage the risks around change. It's going to go better. There are some things that you can't necessarily see coming. Not all change is foreseeable, not all change can be planned for, but if you're in the habit of doing this, if unexpected change comes and hits you in the face, you're probably in a better position to deal with it in a systematic, thoughtful way, rather than just panicking. Okay, clause 8. Text referring to outsourcing replaced by externally provided processes, products and services. And to an extent, this comes back to how do we understand language? Outsourcing was really differently understood by different people and in different parts of the world and in different industries. And this comes back to what I was saying before. Sometimes we just need to use more words. Use more words, spell it out. And, you know, for me, when we're writing standards, I like to encourage committees to write a sentence that an intelligent 12-year-old could read and basically understand. Let's write it so it is just, give the user something which is easy to understand. Even if it's difficult to do, make it simple to understand. Sometimes that's a challenge. But if we can start from that premise, simple words, short sentences, short paragraphs. But if a word is confusing people, add some more words, explain it. And that works. That's what we did here. And then simplification of documented information. One of the criticisms of management systems in the past has been, God, it's bureaucratic. Oh my God, there's so much paper involved, etc., etc., etc. And we introduced this term of documented information to shift away from that, to say, you know, you want to record your management meetings? That's fine. That's documented information. You want to do a video, you want to do an audio recording, emails are documented information. So it's trying to address the change in ways we work, adapting to our many new technologies that can be used to make life easier in the making sure we are documenting things, we've got records of things, we've got plans for things, we've had discussions, it was properly discussed and debated, like in our meetings today. We had big discussions of things. We will have documented information based on the results of those discussions, but it'll be simple. It'll only be what we need it to be to get our process done. And it's the same in the harmonised structure. You retain, you create documented information that helps your management system, that makes it work. And then the clause 10 sequence, the change to ensure continual improvement is the focus. There used to be, I think, too much focus on, oh, you made a mistake. Oh, there's a non-conformity. We did something wrong. And continual improvement isn't always about fixing mistakes. It's not always about non-conformities to your management system when it's audited by somebody. You may have made some mistakes, in which case do something about it, make it better, do the corrective action. But there's other ways to improve. There's all sorts of ways to improve. So the focus has shifted. 2024, I've already mentioned the new requirement relating to climate change. The other one was on our favourite topic of risk. It appears that no two people agree on the definition of risk. Apparently, we all think about it differently, we all apply it differently, we all want to document it differently. So the change was made that we no longer need to use one definition of risk. I've been very heavily involved in occupational health and safety for many years. The way risk is perceived in the occupational health and safety community is danger. Somebody might die. It's not effective uncertainty. So that was a real issue with the first iteration of that management system standard. How do we get around this? Because in the health and safety community, risk is very clearly bad. It's negative. It can't be positive and negative in the way that the academic risk community like to promote it. We understand that academically. It's not that we disagree. It's just in health and safety, that's not how your user of that standard is reading it. So now we don't need to use that definition. We can choose our own definitions or have no definition. We can go with the common understanding, the dictionary term, the general perceived view of what risk is, if that works for our technical discipline. And if it doesn't,
write your own definition, and that's fine. We accept we're never going to get consensus on it at this point. We've tried for years and years, it doesn't work. Okay, the other big change that came in, actually this is 2025, not 2024, the last part of this slide. The rules changed last year, last March, the rules changed. The ISO Technical Management Board said you can no longer change the numbering or the names of the clauses in the harmonised structure. You cannot touch them. Now, we can add extra subclauses as we need to and call them what we like, but you don't touch the ones that are provided as the core text. And the other one was you don't touch the terms and definitions. They apply across all management system standards without any deviation at all, because then it's easier for users. You can add a clarification, you can add a note onto the end of other notes, or if it hasn't got a note, a new note, to clarify how you understand it in this context, but that is all the change you can make to the core terms and definitions. Those words are too small for me to read, and for you, probably. But the harmonised structure is there, as I said before, to help our users. We want commonality across our management system standards so that people, organisations can implement as many of them as they feel is useful to them. So when we're developing standards, we are strongly encouraging people to not touch that core text. Sometimes people argue very strongly and convincingly that that core text requirement or the way that is wording does not work. It does not work for our committee, does not work for this discipline that we're focusing on. And when that happens, that's okay. The point is you need to be able to give a technical justification for those changes because they need to be as limited as possible to help our users, to help integration. So they are discouraged, but ultimately, if the experts say, no, really, truly, honestly, this just doesn't work for us, we need to strengthen it, or we need to delete that word or add this word, ultimately the committee will make that decision, can make that decision, and there may be deviations. So it's always worth remembering if you are looking at management systems, if you're looking at implementation of multiple management systems, that although the core text is the core text, there may be some subtle differences in there. Hopefully, over time, that will become less and less as we refine the harmonised structure. But at the moment, some committees may have thrown a few extra words in which will change the requirement. So pay attention. Don't assume it's identical all the time. Even though it should be, it's not. Anything else important in there? Not really. But just that point, don't assume all the core requirements are 100% identical across all the disciplines. Currently, there is some variation. Over time, we're hoping to minimise it, but right now, be aware, otherwise you might miss something important. I've already told you about this. Some new rules, again, introduced last year, that now the technical committee, the ISO technical committee, the parent committee, must approve any deviations to the harmonised structure. It used to be a working group decision, the experts in the room, the people who'd had all the discussions, but now all members of the committee that the document is in need to approve it before it can go forward, which is good. It's another level of scrutiny. You know, this is a community that understands the importance of external audits. It's the same kind of idea. Fresh eyes are looking at it. And they're going, really? You really need to do that? Oh, I'm not sure about that one. But that one, absolutely, completely agree. Totally understand why you've done that. So it's good. It's an extra layer, and it just helps us move forward. Okay, who decides if a deviation is accepted? This is something that comes up a lot, and there's a lot of misconceptions about who has the authority to say no. Essentially, only the Technical Management Board could really enforce a no. And the Technical Management Board is a small number of countries in the ISO community that make all the high-level decisions. They are top management for ISO's technical community. If there's an appeal, if there's a complaint, it goes up there, they have the final word. So only they can say no realistically. But we have this process. We have what's called a deviation report. You have to list any changes that you make to the harmonised structure. You have to justify those. And then that gets sent into ISO Central Secretariat, where I sit, and the editor will be the first person to read those, and then quite often will come to me and to other colleagues and go, I'm not sure I'm convinced by this justification. Is that really technical? And we have a conversation. And the deviation report also goes to the Technical Management Board's expert MSS group, the JTCG, the Joint Technical Coordination Group for Management System Standards, which is populated by chairs, committee managers, and experts from the management system community. And they look at the deviation reports too. And they may come back and say, yeah, no, I'm not sold. I don't believe this is a technical justification. Let's talk to the committee. And then we have a conversation. Often the editor, working with the JTCG, technical program manager, people like me, will try and come up with an alternative that the committee might consider so that they don't need to deviate. And a lot of the time, that works. A lot of the time, we can find a solution. And then sometimes there will be some things that go through where we just go, oh no, that completely makes sense. So we're currently developing a management system standard to help organisations optimise their contributions to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That very vague, simple, light climate change requirement that goes in all management system standards, it's just not strong enough when you're working on the Sustainable Development Goals. So when a deviation was made to that, and it was sent for examination, and just, are we all right with this? Everybody came back and just went, yeah, that's fine. Because there was no question, it needed strengthening. It would have kind of undermined the rest of the document if it hadn't been changed. So you talk, we all talk. The whole ISO process is about consensus building. It's about conversation, it's about dialogue. We discuss these issues, we try and find a solution. And if we can't, in the end, it's up to the committee to make the decision. So nobody can say no, but we do need to seek to find solutions in exactly the same way we do when we're writing a document and we've got different opinions. And that is it. There are some frequently asked questions there, but I don't think we need to go through them. You can read them in the slides. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sally, for this very interesting and I don't know how to say it. Very good is probably the word presentation about a topic that is sometimes very complex. So thank you very much for making it very easy to all of us. So I don't know if are there some questions? Don't be shy. Okay, fantastic. One here.
Thank you. This is just a question of curiosity. Why do you use the term deviation? Deviations instead of suggestions or suggestion changes or something like that?
It's quite a strong word, isn't it, a deviation? But I think the point is that you are, in the most literal sense, deviating from the core requirements or the core wording. It is not going in the same direction as was intended. So I think that's why. So it isn't We have suggestions for improvement for the harmonised structure all the time. They go to the Joint Technical Coordination Group, we discuss them and we develop ways to improve it for the future, for the next revision. But when you're just you're developing your document, you're going to publish it, that is a deviation because it is not looking like everybody else's. That's why we use the word deviation. But it is quite harsh, I agree. I understand.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. Are there more questions? No, everybody is very shy this afternoon. Remember that if you want to make it in Spanish, we can help you to translate it if you don't feel brave enough to make it in English. Okay, yes, I knew. We will have some curious academics here.
We like curiosity. Bring on the curiosity.
Thank you for the presentation. I will try to, I prefer to do the question in Spanish because I think I have some words that I don't know how to translate it in English. Aquí mi pregunta, mi inquietud es, ¿cómo todos estos cambios y actualizaciones del estándar los vamos a aterrizar en la ejecución de nuestros sistemas de gestión de calidad en la UNAM?
Es que la estructura armonizada es para los que escriben normas.
Okay, entonces,
tú ya lo ves en la ISO 9001.
Ok, entonces digamos, este es para aquellos grupos de trabajo que están realizando la norma.
Exactamente,
Okay.
como los que estamos allá arriba ahorita escribiendo
Okay.
la 9001.
Okay.
So he just asked why or how the harmonized structure is going to be reflect in the work they do implementing the standards. So I just said that this is for the people who write the standards, but I don't know if you want to complement it a little bit.
I don't quite understand the question, I'm
yes,
sorry.
he asked how everything you explained, they are going to apply it in their quality management systems. So I said that they are going to see it applied in the standards. So, but I don't know if you want to complement it more.
If I've understood the question correctly, and apologies if I have not. So the thing is about our standards, that they're not an instruction manual for your organisation. You don't go in and go, oh, I'm going to implement this now, and you're going to shape your whole business around it. You're using those standards to work with the way you work. So you'll see that requirement, one of the requirements, and you go, oh, well, we do this, that, and the other. Is there something we're missing? It helps you shine the light on things, on what you're already doing, and then seeing how they interlink with each other. So you're applying it to what you do in the way you do it, and that's really important. It isn't, it isn't the ISO standards telling you how to run your business. They're absolutely not. What they're saying is, don't forget about this, and don't forget about that, and make sure you link them all up because they affect each other. But it all depends on how you organise what you do in your own organisation.
Well, thank you very much, Sally, for that clarification, because that is a constant battle when we are, assessed by certification bodies or accreditation bodies that want to see things in a certain way and not exactly in the way that the committee discussed that issue, which is, there is some gaps there. So thank you very much for the question, but because leads to that interesting answer.
Let me just add something on that, because at times when we're drafting standards in some committees want to put in how to do it in the requirements documents. Management system standards are about what to do, not how to do it. And really, your auditor shouldn't be telling you how to do it either. It's up to you how you do it. Meet the requirement in the way that suits you. That's really important.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Is there another question? No? Well, in this case, Please give an applause to Sally, and let's give us. Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you very much. And certificate from the university. Hey, look at that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really liked being here.
No, we love to have you here. You can come anytime.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Jose. So let's continue with our next speaker this afternoon. We are absolutely delighted, let me tell you, because we are going to have next our dear Sam Somerville. She is leading this new version of the ISO 9001. She is actually our boss in the working group 29, is leading all the discussions, all the changes, and I guess that's probably a very good introduction, but let me tell you also that Sam helps organizations as ours to implement integrated management systems and internal audit solutions across many fields: quality, environment, occupational health, safety and information security. Her approach combines strong analytical and communication skills with a commitment to understanding organizational and customer requirements, enable to identify opportunities for improvement and deliver measurable results. She, as I told you before, she's leading the revision of ISO 9001, but also she chairs subcommittee 2 in ISO 176 and is involved with a lot of projects and task activities in ISO, because as you may imagine, being leader of this working group and the subcommittee 2 is an important task in this world of international standards, but also in the management systems one. So please let me, or help me to receive Sam with an applause, because he's our next speaker.
Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Sam Somerville, and today I want to share a practical look at where ISO 9001 is heading. This isn't an official ISO position. This is me. What I'll share is a personal perspective based on my experiences and the technical side of the revision work within TC 176, as Monica just said, and the real-world challenges of the organisations that I work with, who use quality management systems to help them to work more reliably, more confidently, and with fewer surprises. My aim is simple. I'm going to explain why the revision matters, what is changing, what's staying the same, and also what that means for the road ahead. Before we go any further, just a quick reminder that ISO 9001 is still at draft international standard stage. So that means that it isn't fully fixed. It could well change. And so the details that I'll share today are based on the current version and not the final text. And you'll notice, You'll notice also that I'm not going to be showing or quoting any of the text specifically. Instead, I'm going to focus today on the key themes, the intent, and the practical implications for users. So, I'm showing you this. As you can see, I work in the standards development at a national and international level. I'm currently involved directly, as Monica said, in the revision of ISO 9001 as a convener of the working group. And I also actively work with organisations, especially SMEs and those in fast-moving or informal environments, to support them in the implementation or development of integrated management systems. And I'm also an auditor. And what that means is that I understand the different perspectives. I see how standards are written. I understand how they're actually used within the organisations as well. And one thing that is very clear to me is that quality only works when it works for people. If a system doesn't make sense to the people who need to use it, then it doesn't matter how well it's documented. It doesn't matter how well it's certificated. It's not going to work. Oops. So let's start with the really obvious question. Why is ISO 9001 being updated at all? The world that organisations operate in has shifted significantly over the past decade. To stay relevant, ISO 9001 needs to reflect that shift. Processes that were stable at the time of the last revision are now deeply affected by the challenges such as digital workflows, data dependencies, and faster-moving customer expectations. So it's reasonable and necessary that ISO 9001 evolves too. Let's start with the why before we talk about the what. So these global developments influence how organisations work, how decisions are made, and how predictable processes really are. Political and economic volatility affects stability. Digital tools have transformed the way that work is done. Expectations around responsible conduct, transparency, and trust are now mainstream. And these global shifts create a new backdrop for how quality systems need to function. All of this increases the need for stable decision-making, consistent information, and systems that people can rely on, even when the external picture is changing so quickly. ISO 9001 has to keep making sense in a world defined by speed, complexity, and higher expectations. And these global shifts translate into very real, very practical pressures inside organisations. Leaders are dealing with shorter decision cycles, more uncertainty, and constant change. Supply chains have become less predictable. Talent shortages are affecting every region and sector. Climate-related impacts are now part of everyday risk planning, not long-term theory. And we've experienced that ourselves in our working group with the many colleagues that haven't been able to attend our meeting. And these issues show up across all sectors, not just in the complex industries, and they affect organisations of every type, especially smaller organisations and those in emerging or rapidly changing markets. For example, a small supplier can now experience global supply chain disruption within days and needs systems that are flexible enough to respond. ISO standards help by providing a stable framework that supports resilience and consistent decision-making, even when the external environment moves quickly. And it's also important to remember that SMEs make up 90% of global business and employ well over half the world's workforce. In many regions, the informal economy plays a huge role too, and their constraints and realities are different from those of the larger organisations. When ISO 9001 is explained clearly and implemented sensibly, It gives those organisations a structure that they can grow with, without unnecessary bureaucracy. Clearer intent in the standard helps SMEs avoid over-interpreting requirements, a structure that they can grow with. Clearer intent in the standard helps SMEs avoid over-interpreting requirements and building unnecessary documentation, which we know is a common challenge globally. And that's one of the reasons that this revision places such emphasis on clarity and accessibility. If the standard is easier to understand, then more organisations can implement it effectively. So ISO 9001 remains the world's most used management system standard. It's widely adopted across more than 180 economies, and its use has grown beyond manufacturing into digital services, healthcare, logistics, education, and the public sector. Quality has become, in my opinion, the universal foundation for building trust, consistency, and confidence, no matter what type of organisation you are. And because the user base is now so diverse, clarity has become absolutely critical. The standard has to make sense, whether you're a micro enterprise in a fast-moving market or a complex multinational with integrated systems. And that diversity is one of the strongest reasons for evolving the standard. Organisations need a consistent understanding of what ISO 9001 is asking for. And the standard needs to work equally well for organisations with formal structures and those operating in highly adaptive environments. Now let's bring this a bit closer to home. Implementation. Across sectors and regions, we are seeing a consistent pattern. Organisations believe that they're applying ISO 9001 correctly, and yet many still struggle to get the real benefits that the standard is designed to deliver. There's a gap, and it's not a gap in the requirements themselves, but in how those requirements are interpreted and translated into everyday practice. Implementation quality varies enormously, and it's common to see documented processes that look complete on paper, but the way that people actually work doesn't follow them. They're not reflected. And it's that gap where the performance issues appear. And that variability is one of the key drivers behind the updates that we're making. So let's take a closer look at what actually causes that implementation gap. One of the biggest challenges that we see is the temptation to treat ISO 9001 as a tick box exercise. But when ISO 9001 becomes a checklist, organisations miss the point. They end up focusing on passing audits instead of improving how they work. Feedback from users around the world tell us that the real problems are in understanding, capability, and practical application, not in the requirements themselves. And when the focus shifts to passing an audit, organisations unintentionally lose sight of why those processes existed in the first place. And that's exactly what the revision aims to address. Clearer intent, simpler interpretation, and a stronger focus on using the system to drive value, not paperwork. The real value of ISO 9001 has never, ever been the certificate. The value lies in building trust, creating consistent results, improving reliability, supporting adaptation and resilience, enabling organisations to pivot during change. When ISO 9001 becomes a part of everyday work, not an extra task, then the mindset changes completely. It stops being about conformity and it becomes about capability. For example, when teams share a common approach to managing customer issues. Response times drop, consistency improves. That's the value of an ISO 9001 system. Organisations with strong systems tend to recover faster from disruption because their processes and information flows are clear. They also experience fewer errors, fewer delays, and better use of resources. And these aren't theoretical ideas, they are consistent patterns across sectors and regions. Data demonstrates that an effective QMS is not just about conformity, it's a financial asset. It helps organisations become steadier during disruption, recover faster when things go wrong, and operate at a lower cost with more reliable outcomes. Something as simple as clarifying responsibilities and communication channels often reduces delays, rework, and frustration across teams. And a well-embedded QMS improves resilience, stability, and efficiency. In a world where uncertainty is becoming the norm, those advantages matter more than ever. So with that context in place, let's have a look at how the revision responds to these needs and how it strengthens ISO 9001 for the future. One question that I hear often is whether ISO 9001 will include AI-specific requirements. And the answer is no, and that's deliberate. The standard has always been technology neutral. It focuses on outcomes, control, reliability, monitoring, and competence. Those principles apply whether processes are manual, fully digital, or supported by AI. That doesn't change. Technology can automate analysis or highlight anomalies, but it doesn't replace leadership or accountability. And the standard gives organisations the freedom to adopt new technologies without having to reinterpret the requirements every time those tools evolve. ISO 9001 remains a stable framework in a rapidly evolving landscape. Technology is advancing, but quality still lives or dies in human behaviour. Most significant quality failures today are not technical. They're rooted in communication, roles, or assumptions. Systems fail when communication breaks down. Roles aren't clear, people aren't engaged, decisions aren't transparent, and leadership doesn't role model expected behaviours. You can automate processes, but you can't automate integrity. And that's why the revision strengthens the human aspects: competence, awareness, communication, and culture. Leadership behaviour shapes the entire system. When leaders use the QMS as a real management tool, rather than a reporting exercise, the organisation becomes more transparent, more consistent, and more resilient. The revision emphasises leadership, culture, and ethical behaviour because these create the conditions for quality to succeed. Quality thrives where people feel safe to speak up, to raise issues early, and to do the right thing even when no one is watching. The revision focuses on strengthening clarity and intent in areas that users struggle with the most. And that's where we move now from the why to the how. It's important to say clearly that this is not a radical rewrite of ISO 9001. Users made it very clear that they need continuity, not disruption. The revision strengthens key areas: leadership and culture, risk and opportunity, and change management. But the structure of it stays the same, and the familiar principles remain. And this will really help organisations to transition smoothly without major retraining or system redesign. The goal is to make the standard easier to understand and easier to use. Here, the revision strengthens the existing expectations around leadership behaviour, awareness, and the working environment. Nothing new is being added. These principles already exist in the current standard, but user feedback shows that organisations often struggle to understand how strongly culture influences performance. The draft reinforces that leadership is responsible for establishing values, openness, and integrity, all of which support reliable processes and good decision-making. It also clarifies the importance of awareness and communication so that people understand the consequences of their actions on quality. This is not about additional controls or new policies. It's a reminder that systems work when people feel safe to raise those issues early. Information flows clearly and behaviours align with the organisation's purpose. For many organisations, this will feel like recognition of what they already do, what they've learned in practice, rather than a change to requirements. A strong culture creates strong systems. One of the clearest adjustments in the draft is the separation of risk and opportunity within Clause 6. These concepts, again, already exist in ISO 9001, but the revision recognises that organisations often default to risk and overlook opportunity. By distinguishing them more clearly, the standard encourages organisations to think in two directions. What could disrupt performance and what could strengthen it? This doesn't mean creating 2 new registers or additional documentation. It simply means planning in a more structured way. For example, a supply chain risk assessment and an opportunity to improve digital capability require very different conversations, different evidence, and different actions. And this distinction helps organisations to plan more clearly and encourages a more balanced approach to improvement. Change continues to be one of the most challenging areas in implementation globally. This draft strengthens this clause by emphasising that change is part of everyday organisational activity and management of the QMS, not something exceptional. The intention is not to add bureaucracy. It's to reinforce a predictable approach. Plan the change, communicate it, and check whether the intended results were actually achieved. And this applies to small changes as much to major ones. The revision also makes it clear that management of change is not a corrective action process. It's about capability, the ability to adapt confidently without losing control. And this supports smoother transitions and more consistent decision-making in environments where change is constant. Oh, okay. It's a different slide deck. Never mind. So what I'm going to do is I will talk to you now anyway about what isn't going to change. One of the strongest messages from global consultation was the need for stability. Users value the structure of ISO 9001, the process approach, and risk-based thinking. And this draft retains all of these without adding layers or altering the familiar architecture. Documentation flexibility remains exactly as it is today. There's no increase in mandatory documented information and no expectation to restructure existing systems. This continuity is deliberate. The standard remains recognisable and stable while improving clarity where users told us that clarity was needed. And that continuity also reduces the burden on SMEs, for example, who rely on predictable, stable requirements to maintain their systems effectively. Okay, now we're back to where I thought we should be. There are also improvements designed to make the standard clearer and easier to navigate, especially for new users or those working in integrated systems. As you've already heard from Sally just now, the harmonised structure is an ISO requirement for all management system standards. With more organisations now using multiple ISO standards, aligning core text and structure makes integrated management systems easier to build, maintain and audit. This also saves the user time, it reduces duplication and supports smoother implementation. Annex A may be one of the most practically valuable parts of the revised standard. It doesn't reintroduce any new requirements. Its purpose is simply to clarify the intent in plain, accessible language. This helps to reduce misinterpretation, particularly for SMEs, new users, and organisations working across multiple languages. It also reduces dependency on what we know can be variable consultancy and auditor explanations. Clearer intent supports better implementation, and better implementation reduces the gap between what organisations think ISO 9001 requires and what it is actually asking for. Looking ahead, the direction of travel is clear. Stronger alignment with strategy, a deeper focus on culture, and an emphasis on resilience. ISO 9001 will continue to help organisations focus on what truly matters. Quality management is becoming more interdisciplinary. ISO 9001 needs to support organisations working across strategy, people, sustainability, technology, and customer experience. The more complex the environment becomes, the more organisations need simple, reliable systems that help them to stay stable, adaptable, and trusted. ISO 9001 remains a key part of that. It doesn't matter how well the standard is revised. A QMS is only successful if people understand it, use it, and apply it in a way that genuinely supports the organisation's objectives. So what does the emerging direction mean for your QMS, and what are the potential practical implications? For organisations with established and effective systems, the current draft suggests that your existing structure is likely to remain valid. The revision strengthens intent, not complexity, and the core architecture of ISO 9001 remains stable. But organisations can take this moment to reflect on areas that might benefit from strengthening, not because the draft requires change, but because these seem to consistently support reliable performance. For example, taking a fresh look at the people-related aspects of the QMS to understand whether awareness, communication, and culture are consistently helping people to work in alignment with the organisation's objectives. Or how effectively opportunities are being identified and considered alongside risks in planning. Or whether routine changes are understood and communicated within teams, especially where small adjustments can have wider impacts. These aren't actions directly linked to the revision of ISO 9001. They're simply part of maintaining a healthy, continually improving QMS, and they remain relevant regardless of how the final text evolves. As quality professionals, our role continues to evolve too. We'll increasingly act as connectors and facilitators, bridging teams, aligning processes with strategy, improving communication, helping organisations to think systematically. Our role becomes less about rules, documents, or conformity, and more about enabling people and organisations to be their best every day. And of course, ISO 9001 does not stand alone. There's a whole ecosystem of standards to support organisations in their journey towards effective quality management and sustained success. You can see them on the slide here. When used together, these standards help organisations mature their systems and provide a clear roadmap for long-term improvement. Sorry, different slide again, but never mind. ISO 9001 remains one of the world's most trusted tools for building reliable and resilient organisations. It continues to matter because it helps organisations work with clarity and confidence in a world defined by rapid change. This revision strengthens that purpose without adding complexity. And when the standard becomes easier for people to understand and use, it becomes more effective. And that's what really makes the difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam, for your very good and interesting presentation. I think that everybody now has a very good view about what to expect our next version of the standard. So I guess some of you will have some questions. Okay.
Maybe this is not a question. I think that it's an opinion, because I understand that the presentation is a point of view from Sam. So I guess that if all the people that forms a part of this committee has the same opinion of this point of view that Sam has, because I understand that sometimes many people say that we want to less requirements to simplificate the implementation of the QMS for the organizations. But when you take this point of view to the practice, it's very, very complex. Not all the people that evaluates the requirements understand it that way. So sometimes the organizations guides to simplify the QMS, but not the people who audits the requirements has the same point of view. And I think that sometimes we don't match the point of view from the organizations and the point of view from the auditors that you have. So it's very complex to match these points. So that's it.
That's a great question. It's a great perspective for us to consider, so thank you for that. And when you say, does everyone have the same opinion? Absolutely not. We've been in the room all day today hearing lots and lots of different perspectives, different thoughts, and that's exactly what we do in standards development, is to listen to all of those different opinions, different thoughts, and to try and pull them together into one route forward that everyone might not necessarily be fully happy with, but it's a compromise that we can live with, and it's a compromise where we believe that it's going to help our users of our standard to really understand what the intent is and to apply it effectively to have a good quality system. So that's from one perspective about how we develop the standards. We don't all have the same opinion. But also then you mentioned about organisations understanding and then also auditors. So everything that we're doing to develop the standard is to try and support organisations to understand what that intent is. Sally mentioned earlier that actually it's not about having one fixed route to achieve the requirements. It's about fitting the requirements in to your organisation in a way that makes sense to your organisation. And so, yes, of course, every organisation is different, and they will all apply the requirements of this standard in a different way. And that's how it should be. That's our role, is to make it clear so that they can make those judgments. And then in theory, then, whether or not they've met the requirements would be assessed by an auditor if they're going for certification. Another part of our role then, as standards developers, is to clearly communicate with the organisations, but also with the certification bodies and accreditation bodies, to really ensure that the intent of the requirements of ISO 9001 are clear, understood, and practically able to be applied, so that everybody is as much as possible on the same page, even if there will be bits that we agree with and bits that we don't. Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
may I just clarify a couple of issues also? When I invited Sam to give, this lecture, something that she asked me to do and I did, and I'm so sorry about that, was to clarify that it was she was going to present her opinion about this issue, because of course the standard is on revision right now, so we haven't finished doing that. So I'm so sorry for not telling that to the audience, and I will try to justify why I forgot it. It is normal in academia that people who are in the stage presenting something presents their own opinions. So that's why for us it's a little bit strange to clarify that, because here in the university, and I think in any Western university, we are expecting that people who are in front teaching something, giving a lecture, is presenting their own opinions. Otherwise, what we tend to use is to say, well, the committee says this, or most of the experts' opinion on that, but I disagree because of that. Is when we actually make the point of the committee itself. So just to clarify, for all of you that are not part of the academia and that may be a little bit confusing. So I apologize for that. So I guess probably we will have another question. How do you feel?
Monica, can I just add something really quickly as well?
Yes.
Because as Monica said, I'm the convener of the working group that is revising ISO 9001. And as part of that role, I'm actually not allowed to have an opinion. So my role in that is very much to be neutral and to listen to others and to allow that shared conversation and to hear those different views and perspectives. So it's not often that I actually have a chance to tell people what my view is. But thank you for clarifying.
Thank you to you, Sam. I think this was very important. Go ahead, Abraham.
First off, I just want to say these speeches have been so brilliant for me. When I first started studying standards and ISOs, it almost seemed oppressive. Memorize this list, don't get away from it, listen to what someone tells you, be afraid of the auditor, be afraid of him, and just don't get in the way. But I think what you're saying is that these are based on values. And these values lead you to an incredibly capable company if you can be creative, if you can think for yourself, if you can apply it to your own company. I've been studying these things for only a year. I'm supposed to be a communications expert and a salesman, and this is one of the first times I am absolutely blown away by how beautiful this system is. What I want to ask, how can somebody tap into what you're saying while also being aware of how different auditors will interpret different things? Again, thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you. Great question. And from my perspective, I think the best way is just to build your knowledge and understanding. I showed a slide earlier with all of the different standards on. Let me see. Oh, I can't do it. But read ISO 9000. It's really, really important. You can't have a really good and effective quality management system that meets the requirements of ISO 9001 unless you've read and understood ISO 9000. 9002 is currently in the process of being revised, but that too is a really good standard for supporting organisations to understand what does that requirement actually intend for us to have to do? How can I demonstrate conformity to that requirement? And of course, ISO 9004 is, I'm not going to say it's the next stage, it's a different standard, but it's all about quality in organisations for sustained success. Even if you think you've got an amazing quality management system, how does it actually apply within your organisation? How are you living those values within your organisation? And it does depend on what organisation you're in, what sector you're in, what industry. Some are very focused on very much just, this is what we have to do in order to meet this requirement to provide these products, for example. But some, I tend to work with a lot of consultancies and designers and things like that. And it's really looking at applying it to the whole organisation. That's where you get value. But in order to build that value, you have to understand. And you have to be confident also. So if you have an auditor who comes in and says, oh, you haven't got this register and therefore you haven't met the requirement, you need to have the confidence to say, okay, well, show me where it says in the requirements of this document that I have to have a risk register or whatever it is. It doesn't. As again, Sally mentioned earlier, we talk about the what, not the how. And being able to apply the what to your organisation in a way that makes sense to you, that uses language that your organisations use, that's really the value of a strong quality management system. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Abraham, for your question, and thank you, Sam, for your very clever answer. So, is there another question? Okay, I knew.
Hi, I prefer say in Spanish. My English is very bad. Le iba a comentar. Para esta parte, sabemos como ahorita la IA ya está abarcando como tal toda esta parte. Hemos estado viendo pues todas las herramientas que tiene, vemos cómo se puede implementar un sistema de gestión, más sin embargo pues tiene muchos errores todavía. ¿Qué tanto es la probabilidad de que en un futuro, 3, 5 años, ya no necesiten, en este caso, auditores como tal, evaluar la conformidad del sistema de gestión? ¿Qué tanto es la probabilidad de que la IA como tal ya vea bien lo que es la empresa, lo que son los procesos y con solamente la información documentada ellos puedan auditar y otorgar un certificado? ¿Es probable o no?
What a very difficult question. Well, he is basically asking about your opinion as a consultant about the role of the artificial intelligence is going to have. If you see in the future, the artificial intelligence program software companies actually conducting ISO 9001 audits instead of an auditor. So that's basically the question. How do you see the future?
As I think I said in my slides, the principles remain the same. How you achieve something, whether it's manually, whether it's using technology, whether it's using AI, the requirements apply equally. It doesn't matter. AI is just a tool, the same as any other tools. And as if an organization is using AI effectively within the requirements of the standard, as long as you have that human element. You can't replace leadership. AI cannot be a leader. It can give evidence to support the leadership in their decision making, but ultimately it's leaders that have to be accountable. So that's why the revised standard is technology neutral. It's a tool that you use. We'll be moving on to quantum next. So, if we referenced AI within this standard, it would very quickly become out of date. It has a really strong place, really can support the organisations depending on what they do, but we have to recognise also its limitations and the importance of people in a good quality management system.
Yes, thank you very much, Sam. If I can, complement a little bit, we have a huge discussion in last CAS committee about the role of artificial intelligence in actually auditing and assessment and everything, and it is pretty interesting. We will talk about this a little bit on Thursday during the last conference as well. So apart from what Sam just mentioned, we were talking about this particularly focus that you are interested to. So thank you very much, Sam, for your very nice presentation. We are going to give you a present from the university, so when you use it, you can probably remember, this lecture. and also certificate of recognition. So thank you very much for your lecture. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jose. And thank you, everybody, for coming today for these lectures. See you tomorrow at 5:30 again. Thank you also for all the staff for this coordination, Luz and Letty for helping us to organize this event. And also thank you very much, Julio, for all the effort the whole day in the ceremony and also in the meeting and here. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you. See you tomorrow.